Yes, I'm just gonna pass this over. And
You can throw it as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Do you have to?
Yeah.
Do you have to go in? Hello? Hello? Yeah? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are going to kick off. So I just want to introduce the SVP of Design here at SumUp, Pamela Mead, who would just like to give a little introduction beforehand.
Hello, everybody. It's super excited to have such a huge crowd here because this is our first event since COVID hit. So it's at least first design event. So it's really great to see such a big audience. I'm Pamela. I head up design globally. I've been with SumUp for a little bit over 3 years. When we talk about design, it's user research, brand design, product design, and marketing design. So quite a diverse group of talent. Out of curiosity, who has heard about SumUp before or seen one of our card readers? Yes, all right, good. Let me just give you a quick little short intro though in history. If you can, it's okay, it's really brief. If you,
The mic.
can you? Yeah, all right, just sum up in numbers. We are a company committed to small merchants. I'll tell you in a minute the mission statement. We have about 2 million monthly active users. We're in 35 markets, so we really aim to be a global company. And we have, we've grown to be about 3,200 SumUppers, of which 90-ish are designers. So really quite an exciting growth and development. If you go next. Our mission is to really create a world where merchants can be successful, where they can build a thriving business. And it's we're a very mission-driven company, which is very, very exciting. I'm not going to tell you much more about it. I'll give you a little visual because we are designers. And then if you are interested in learning more about SumUp or anything that we have to offer, we'll talk to Olga or me or afterwards. Okay, now you choose another. Cool, thank you. This is all I wanted to offer for an introduction. Like I said, if you want to learn more, talk to me, talk to Olga, talk to some of the sum-uppers here. But what's super exciting is the conversation you're going to have now, because the future that we want to be creating is really going to be informed by a lot of the topics. So Beth, thank you, and looking forward to exciting talk.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you again, everyone, for coming to our first Soda Social event of 2023. For those of who are new to Soda Social is our innovative networking platform. It allows us and you to engage with us and our digital world in a relaxed, informative and lighthearted way. We strive to innovate, educate and inspire future leaders of technology. So Soda Social is powered by Trust in Soda. Some of you may have heard from working with myself, as I saw a few familiar faces today. We are a digital technology recruitment brand with a key mission to empower and build diverse communities that represent the digital world we live in. We recruit within a number of divisions in the tech space, working across data, DevOps, product management, marketing and sales, but most importantly, design. So I am thrilled to be joined by a panel of thought-leading experts to discuss the hottest and most exciting UX trends of 2023. To introduce myself, we've got the agenda here. I have just got a code of conduct of what to kind of expect from this evening. We want this to be a safe space for everyone to engage and participate. But introduce myself, I am Beth Eagles. I am your host and chair for this evening. I am a recruitment consultant who specializes in permanent design across the German market. I'm not only passionate about growing diversity within the design space, but also creating awareness across the whole tech industry. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our first panel member, Reem.
Hi, so great to see everyone here. So my name is Reem, and I'm an architect who switched to UX, and now I'm in product. So I've made my way through the journey, and design is at the heart of everything I really enjoy to do. But I really see the role as something that everyone is responsible for in the process. So really excited to chat with you all. And just where I'm working right now in a startup called Pretium. My previous job was with AutoScout, which is located in Munich, and where I met Paz.
Hello, my name is Paz. I've been working in tech for 9 years now. I work in startups and also big companies. Last year, I moved from Buenos Aires to Berlin with no scale. And now I'm leading a team at AutoScout. And I'm a nerd. I love design. I love talking about design. So I'll try to answer some questions today in the panel or after. I'll be always glad. Josh?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Josh Rivers. I'm maybe the black sheep of the panel in that I'm actually a UX researcher by trade, but it's still very closely involved with design. And part of what I'm hoping to contribute to the conversation is really how research and design are really closely connected. So a little bit about me, I actually work in the games industry at a startup called Solston. We work to kind of unlock deep human insights through psychology, basically. So bringing the power of science to the world of video games. Yeah, really excited for the conversation tonight and talking about what we kind of already are seeing emerge for 2023.
Let's talk about this microphone, please.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit. So I also worked with Beth and with Trust in Soda, and I got connected to the most amazing designers in the industry when we were hiring. So if you're looking for a gig, then
Thank you. Sorry, I also did forget to mention throughout the discussion today, we will be conducting some polls because we would love to get you involved. So you can answer these through Slido, www.slido.com. And we are using the code #SodaDesign, Soda being in capital letters. Please feel free to submit any questions on here. There will be a live Q&A at the end. But let's kick off the discussion with our first poll. Please feel free to scan the QR code and go to slido.com. But describe design in 2023 in one word. And I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts as well.
yeah, design in one word.
Yeah.
You first. I'm going to go with the architect definition a little bit, that it's about functionality as well. So like form follows function, and it's not one word, but it has to work.
For me, I think the one word is humans. Like, let's don't forget that this started as human-centered design. So let's bring that back.
It's a great one word, and I'm going to break from the tradition and use a little bit of a phrase, which is more holistic understanding of people. I think it's really important when we're designing, but also researching, to really get the whole human behind the person there.
I feel like I want to live read this. Empathy, layoffs, human.
I mean, there seems to be a lot
Pragmatic.
about emotion in this. Yes. But thank you for submitting them all. What do you think about what is on the board? Anyone on the panel? Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty accurate capturing of the state of things right now. I love seeing the word accessibility up here. That's one that I'm personally really passionate about. And in design, I think it's really important to consider, like I said, kind of the whole sphere and ecosystem there. That's my take on it. Happy to see empathy kind of large and in charge.
And there are a lot of topics that we are going to cover, like AI, ChatGPT, diverse. Like, you're reading the future.
But accessibility seems to be winning in this competition of words from you all, as well as empathy. Don't you guys love when you're trying to learn how to become a UX designer and you see, well, the step one is empathy. Step two, you're a UX designer. So I think sometimes it's also very interesting that empathy is rooted in the art of, or the role of being a designer, but in reality, it's really somehow what you're. It's like repeating the obvious very often. But yeah.
Thank you. Well, after seeing AI on there, we lead to the first question. According to UX expert and CEO Adam Fard, AI-powered UX design means designers and developers can build high-quality user interface much faster. With this being an emerging trend in 2023, can AI complement the UX space? And I am handing this to Josh, as he's very aware of this topic.
Yeah, so working with AI every day also at the company I work with, I think it definitely can be a complement, but it's not a replacement, right? So what I think we need to think about when we're heading into this world where there are now, there's a whole list of different kinds of AI generative tools as well, from not only just text to text, but also audio to audio, image to text, things like this as well. It's a way to work. It's not a replacement for the very real human aspect that we have to bring to the table. So if we go back to that kind of word cloud there that we just created, human was also there, right? And you can't replace the human with an AI. It's a tool to be used, but not something that can replace. Certainly assist us though.
So I guess you've all been playing around with ChatGPT. It's pretty much flooding social media, flooding LinkedIn, flooding everything right now. But the best thing that I got when it comes to it is a friend of mine sent me a list of prompts. And he said, for product and UX, here's a list of prompts that you can use to get your job done. And in the end, it's like those prompts that are really going to make this tool effective. And I think that's where great product, great UX is going to use these tools to eventually become something like a superpower that you can use. But it as itself is something that really needs that. And even Notion right now has integrated AI so you can basically generate things, but they have trained it with their prompts. Like they have their specific prompts in Notion, and they're thinking of their customer. So they know their customer, they know what their customer needs, and they're given prompts that will support their customer in those use cases. So I think it's still coming back down to the basics of great design, research, understanding your customer, and then using those tools to really, make an impact not only in your own work, but in the customer experience.
You definitely touched on it there, but what type of limitations should we expect or be aware of when considering implementing AI in UX design? I'll hand it across to anyone.
I think that we talk about this a little bit. The biggest limitation is that all this ChatGPT and AI, it's based on information that is already there. So how we train this model based on what information, I think is the biggest risk that we need to acknowledge and also understand. So how are we training this? based in, like, we had this great example about voice systems not being able to recognize female voices as well as they do with male voices. So how we train this information, this is all, ChatGPT is not creating something new. It's reorganizing the information that is already there. So what is fitting this whole new technology, for me, is the biggest question that we need to acknowledge.
So who here is working in UX right now? How many of you are working with a data science team on a daily basis or very often? I think that kind of often, that can really show you. So 3 people put their hands up right now. And right now the data science team is sitting in a different part of the building sometimes. And the UX team or design team and the product team is somehow, they're delivering products. And it's like, it's not happening in a way that it's part of the regular process of developing great things. And I think that's what's going to be the shift, especially in our profession, that in the profession of design, is thinking about how we can actually work together. So my experience working with data science teams was they had already created a model and they were like, go create some nice UI for me. Like, I've created this model, I've trained it this way because I think that's the way it makes sense. And the example that it was we were making a natural language search for cars. Okay, so people could just write anything and the right car would show up. However, users didn't want to search for cars that way. And we could have used a simple, a very simple system. And in the end, we created this entire AI that didn't actually solve a real problem. And as designers, we come into this space way too late. And I think that's what's going to be the shift, coming in earlier and actually doing, as Paz said, mitigating those bias, mitigating those risks, and really trying to influence the outcome. So I would really like to see everyone's hands going up, especially as most products these days are dealing with some kind of algorithm or AI. So,
do you have anything you'd like to?
Yeah, happy to. I think both of you covered it really well, but I just want to make sure that we're hitting home a key point in my mind, which goes back to what Paz was saying, which is it's a trained algorithm, right? So if we think about AI, it's also about the base set of information that's put in. And if we think about this from the word cloud area of like empathy and accessibility, one thing that really strikes me that it's kind of to be wary of is what is that set that we're training on, and who's deciding the rules of what AI is going to be looking for. Actually, just today, I was kind of scrolling through LinkedIn and saw a really interesting kind of cloud of photos that was just shared by a friend of a supposed house party, right? And they were like, hey, this is all AI generated. Isn't it so interesting? And there's 2 things that struck me about those photos. One, every single person in the photo was white. And second, they all had incredibly like high cheekbones, which tells you a lot about the kind of data set that particular image generating AI was trained on. And those are things that I think we need to be very wary of, especially from this realm of kind of design as we head into the future, is who is at the table, exactly like Reem pointed out, making sure that this algorithm is also trained in a way that holistically considers who's actually being worked for. So that's the only thing I would add. Otherwise, I think it's just really important to consider and also be at the table with the people who are here with these kind of tools and making them.
Thank you. Going to move on to emotional design, which is something that came up on our Slido. Is emotional design simply a buzzword, or does it hold some interest in the world of UX? I'm going to hand it to Reem for this one.
So I guess I'll turn to the audience. Who has heard of emotional design? Who has claimed that they're doing emotional design on their CV or in their presentations or in their portfolio? Yeah. No, it's nothing against you. What I'm trying to say is it's a descriptive word to describe a kind of design that we're doing. And I think that we in the panel were discussing it. What does it mean? And what, like, is it something that's very, emotional design? That's actually basically your job. Like, make the user happy, make the user not be sad. That's like 101. But then we were digging a little bit into this topic of what it means, what it actually, like, where this comes from. And it has a really historical root and meaning. And I think what I see from my experience, and I'm really happy to hear that I feel that in a lot of our jobs these days, and a lot of the companies, we're really firefighting as designers. We're really trying our best to meet the basic requirements of a good usability, good accessibility, all these kind of things. And things like emotional design designing for a delightful experience, having the user connect to the product, this is somehow falling as a lower priority, or something that we don't really tackle, because we're really just tackling the basics of trying to create good products. And I feel like that's where I almost, I was always like, oh, emotional design, we haven't got time for that. But in reality, it's really a really important concept that I think that we should discuss. Like, how can we make more time, or how can we show that the return of investment of great emotional design?
Do you want to talk about Norman?
Oh, yeah, we have to.
Yes.
So a little bit of a spoiler. Whenever we were preparing for this, I was the person who's like, oh yeah, emotional design. I had no clue what it was or where it came from, because in part it is very much a part of the role, but I also just wasn't sure of the source. Turns out this is a term that's been around since the early 2000s by Norman, the famed one. Yeah. And it's interesting because basically at its core, right, if we think about it, it's getting to the human. It's understanding that there's a person behind the screen, on the other side of the aisle, wherever it happens to be, who has a kind of visceral, behavioral, and reflective state. That's the kind of 3 states that were laid out there. And whenever you're doing this emotional design, it's about designing towards that whole experience. We had an interesting, actually, pre-conversation of sorts, thinking about, well, yeah, but to what extent, if you design and make something like really resonate with somebody, will they forgive some of those usability errors that you kind of have pop up? Interestingly, working in games, this is actually my day-to-day. We see games that have huge bugs, games that are maybe very fun, but have like a glitch somewhere, and people are willing to forgive them because it's resonating with them on an emotional level. So to me, I think that perhaps it was at some point a buzzword, but it's actually important to reconsider what that means within the context of designing and researching and working in today's world.
I said that I'm a nerd, so I'm going to refer just to 2 books about this topic. The first one from Norman ages ago, and he describes there these 3 different levels. And the second one is from MailChimp. They talk about emotional design, and they started with this character and how this character is supporting someone in a really stressful situation that is sending an email into a huge base. So those 2 books recommended.
Totally. And only one more thing comes to mind, which is maybe the negative side of it. So anybody who works in SEO knows that how Google is ranking things is often based on page speed, loading time, and everything like that. And we can talk about Google in general as an entity, but in some of their research, they figured out that when a page is loading and it's stuck, the human being has a reaction like a horror movie, the same kind of reaction of like it's super emotional and visceral. Like the page is loading, you don't know what's going on, and you're just freaking like, you just feel you boiling up. And I've experienced that many times. And I think it's something that is kind of getting to this emotional design part. Like when you don't do it right, when you don't help the user understand what's happening, or when things are loading, when things are slow, it really can have this kind of reaction. And I think that that's a negative reaction we want to avoid, but we want to also create the opposite side of that spectrum, that kind of joy, that kind of enjoyment. And I think that's like something I really take away with me when I think about design and UX and experience, because that's not about the design. That's about like making things faster sometimes. And there are things that we can do, which isn't just pixels. And I think that's the great thing about design. It's not just about the pixels, it's about the entire holistic picture, as Josh was saying. And I think that's where emotional design is a brand. Is emotional design brand? Who's really responsible for this? And I think that it often is like, oh, it's not my job, but it's everybody's job. And I think that's, why it's a really interesting topic.
Thank you. Moving on to personalization. I know we've spoken about this before. We can probably expect even more personalization in 2023 as businesses will use data to better understand their users and create experiences that are more relevant and useful. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that personalization presents? I'm going to go over to Josh to start.
So this is at the core of what we do at Solstin, is personalized video game experiences with game developers for the people who play the games. So very aware of the pitfalls. And some of the pitfalls are very much whenever you talk to users from that research angle, any of you actually doing UX research, either as a researcher or as part of your design work, will know that you can't always trust what's said, right? You have to kind of combine the stated with the observed, with the actual collected. And I think whenever we're creating really personalized experiences, it's important to consider all of those elements, right? As well as deliver to people. Maybe sometimes they don't actually want that, but maybe give them a taste of what that could look like. And then the other element that I think is important when we're talking about personalization is how we're personalizing experiences. There's also going too far, right? I mean, again, just kind of show of hands, how many of you have had an experience where it's almost creepy because it's too in sync with who you are as a person, right? So, I mean, that's me. I'm sure there's quite a few of you here as well. And that's another element to think about when you're personalizing is it can't be too creepy. It's almost stalkery at a certain point.
Yes, totally agree. I found a really nice example about personalization getting into a new level with the Spotify Wrapped last year. At the end of the year, everyone saw it. Everyone shared it on social media too. This is actually driving to Spotify a lot of downloads. That's why every year they invest more money, more teams. There is a team dedicated working the whole year into this Spotify Wrapped. And I think this is a really nice example of how we can leverage personalization into another level that is not so obvious. Many times as designers, we tend to simplify. So we say, okay, these are all our users and this is our only user persona that we are going to be working on. So we choose one user persona, we create this character and we all talk about Rob or Susan. So how we can start using data to make our designs more realistic, to reflect in a better way who are we actually designing for. So I think the Spotify Wrap is something really interesting to read more, how we can generate segments that it's not oversimplifying our user base, and how we can also like give that as value to the user, and this translates into business value. It's like perfect example. So more Spotify Wrap, I would say. I was an adventure.
but I think it's like a really classic psychographic profile versus a demographic profile, which is when you first learn about, personas, that they have these very I mean, right now I'm dealing with it at work in my current job. We're creating our profile, customer profiles, and we're thinking of the kind of business segment they're coming from. Oh, they're from a professional segment, and they're from this this larger segment, or this more how do you say, like professional, more smaller companies and so on. But that doesn't actually reflect at all into the person's needs, because you could be in a big company and have the same needs sometimes as somebody in a small company. It's really figuring out what are those needs and what is the scales that we're looking at. And that's like getting a little bit deeper into what we're trying to achieve. But I think I'm going to speak a little from the product side now, because what I've witnessed a lot is that maybe you have had the same experience, that personalization is a strategy that's very, very, we're going to do personalization. Like that's on the roadmap. Personalization, go for it. You're a team, your job is to do this. And it's not that simple. And it's often like, hey, if we do personalization, we can target you better for ads. We can target you better for content. And it's really coming from that perspective very often. That's why it's making it on the roadmap. But if it makes it on the roadmap, like, for example, in the way that Spotify Wrapped makes it on the roadmap, that, hey, actually, this is the retention factor. I'm not going to quit Spotify until I get my Wrapped, because I invested this whole year into listening to music, and I want, this amazing outcome, and that's like thinking about personalization in a different business goal, rather than just, we can target our customers better. And I think that's where UX is often at the table having this very difficult discussion with business leaders and product, and being like, what do you mean by personalization? Like, what do you actually, what is the user, what do you want to generate? No, just personalize everything, just do it. And you're just like, okay. And I think that's a very difficult exchange I've been in many, many times, where it's like this huge thing we have to achieve. Yeah, I guess you guys are good.
So the next topic, I know we could probably talk a lot about, but I am cautious of time. So ChatGPT, it was on the first Slido. Obviously, as probably many of you are aware, it was launched in November, and it gained over 1 million users in its first week. So for those who are not aware, which I feel like is probably very unlikely in this room, but ChatGPT is the new artificial intelligence chatbot. And is answering questions and taking instructions from users in a conversational, human-like way. Does this type of voice search model create optimism and opportunity among designers? We'll start with Paz.
So I'm surprised that a lot of people haven't tried it. I think we cover a little bit about this when we talk about AI at the beginning. I've seen some examples of how we can use ChatGPT in our daily works. The most interesting or useful that I've seen is writing cover letters and like desktop research. But I think the most important part is what we said before, is that it's information that is already there. So it's facilitating you how to Google search or doing desktop research or writing something interesting. I think the most juicy part of these answers, we already covered them on the previous question. So if we are running, we can go. But I would like, who has the best example? What you asked to ChatGPT? Someone has a funny example of something? You? Yeah. A friend of a friend, yeah.
Because he's a manager and he was using ChatGPT to write feedback.
That's brilliant. My dialogue.
I also thought, okay, you have to add what experience.
So just to repeat if nobody heard, but a manager is using ChatGPT to answer messages to their reports. And the question was, is that ethical or is that a good use of time? Because, you know, managing people as your actual job is apparently too much work.
No, but writing the whole
writing
the whole performance review that you need to write a lot and it takes you a lot of time. You have the idea and you can.
And he also found that it was possible to write using rhymes, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I posted in Slack, a message to our head of operations about how awesome he is. And I asked it to do in the voice of Tupac. So it was like a Tupac rap, like Tupac phrased rap to my, So I get that. I mean, I've been testing ChatGPT in terms of making my job easier a lot. And I actually asked it to create some personas for my company. And to see what data they had to create personas and if they had something I didn't have. And then it was like super, and then I gave it prompts how to make a persona better and so on. And it spit out some really interesting personas. And then I asked it to create some storyboards. So I'm like, describe a story, a day in the life of this person doing their job. And it created some storyboards for me, which I could give somebody to draw them up. And in the end, it was very generic, like, which is what can be expected, you know, from the trained model, not knowing very much. But I think that there are certainly things that, you know, that could help us, you know, do our jobs a little bit better or faster. Let's say, I don't know, better. That's the question.
Thank you. We're doing a word cloud, so we want to hear your thoughts on this. But with all the recent trends, it seems that UX design will never stop advancing. How have your careers evolved since being in that space? And I want to ask the panel, what top skills do you think are required to work in UX design? And maybe more specifically, Josh, I'll start with you, skills needed to interact with researchers when working in UX.
Yeah, there are a couple, and I'm not going to look at the word cloud, but if I say anything, it's not copied. I think curiosity is a big one, especially as a designer working with researchers. Coming to a research team with curiosity about what you have in front of you is going to be really important. Is that on there? Oh, it is in small words. But then other important skills to have in order to kind of bridge the gap between maybe UX design and UX research, just good collaboration as well as clear communication in some sense. And what I mean by this is whenever you go to a UX research team, one of our biggest struggles is oftentimes finding what you actually want to know. Like, what's the real question at the core of what you're trying to ask? So to anybody who's kind of starting to work in this space, a great way to become a partner for UX research is to at least have a clear idea of what you're looking to learn. You don't need to know the question, you don't need to know the method, but a clear understanding of what to learn is going to be key to collaborating in that space. Now I'm curious to hear from the other side. What are some great skills?
I think the biggest one for me is facilitation. Like I've seen how my role, like working in companies, ends up many times like creating a space where everyone can design and everyone can join me in this task of solving a user problem. So facilitating and getting everyone on board of this conversation and creating, for example, the user journeys that allows us to have this conversation, or the workshops, or giving them activities like meeting design and facilitation, I think are my biggest skills. And that's what I'm looking for in someone to join my team. Like they are like looking for this collaboration, but also understanding that this collaboration needs some design. Like you need to create meetings, workshops, environments where everyone is welcome to design, research, product, data science. So yeah, facilitation. Is it there? No, it's
No,
not there.
but no, it's not there.
Can someone put it there?
Facilitation. So my first thought was facilitation, and I think it does come down to stakeholder management, which is interesting that everyone's writing that. I think it's being reinforced right now. When I was managing designers, I think I was managing like 8 designers at a time, and I would say 90% of my conversations were about stakeholder management, to help them do their jobs better. And I think that's just. And now I've switched to product because I kind of want to reduce those conversations and be the stakeholder a little bit more sometimes in those discussions. And I think that's something that I think that we have to be as designers a little bit like a chameleon and let go of our titles a little bit, like even let go of the word UX. Like being responsible for user experience is ridiculous. Like everyone is responsible. Like if the page is loading too slow, then someone has to fix that, and that's going to make a bigger impact in user experience than you changing the button color. So I think that really getting everybody on board to the fact that user experience is belonging to the whole team, and I think that's where stakeholder management is that role, making sure that everybody sees that as part of their job. And I think that's where I like, as an architect or designer or product person, my goal is the same. What I'm trying to achieve, it's just from a different perspective and a different lens.
Facilitation is getting bigger.
Woohoo!
I
So
convinced a lot of people.
you have to add it so Paz is
Yes.
happy.
And I also wanted to know, because I've learned a lot from all 3 of you myself. So what is one top tip you would bestow amongst our audience to help UX designers or researchers stand out in 2023?
Yes, we were talking about this. We are in crazy times, as you have heard, seen, or probably feel. I think the biggest skill is flexibility. Like we need to understand that this is a really new, like we have been working in tech for a short time, and this is an industry that is changing, and it's changing faster. Every time it's like getting into cycles that are shorter. So we need to be able to adapt to that, to find how we can be resilient, how we were working with a team of researchers and copywriters, and now we are a solo designer. So how we can adapt to these new situations, how we can prioritize our work and learn the skills that we don't have because our team is getting smaller or things are changing in the company. Probably a lot of companies now are changing the priorities. So we are having again the conversation about the backlog, and we are having again the conversation. So if we are not able to adapt and we are not flexible enough, we are going to suffer more. So I think my advice for this year is flexibility and life in general, but this year, let's focus.
That's great life advice. I think for UX researchers in particular, and this is partially true for the design space as well, we had this wave where we were told like you must be the strongest advocate for the user at the table. You have to be the voice of the user, like give them space, make sure that they're represented. And that's still true, but something that I think will help people stand out is showing that you understand there's a business side of things as well. Reem kind of spoke to this with the product thing, but it's interesting to consider to what extent are you crafting a user experience, but also how do we balance that with what we need to accomplish within a product space, right? So we can't create super magical experiences, but how do we get to like pretty magical? I think that's how you kind of stand out, is demonstrating this within the space, especially as a researcher, that you understand how to take insights and the research you've done and turn them into realizable, actionable insights. That's something that's going to help people stand out in the space nowadays.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think that with all these changes in AI and everything, some products which have been riding the growth train, that's coming to an end. And I think that design is positioned really great to help rethink the future. And I think that's like we've often been in a very execution space in the process. So we're executing at the end of the vision, but the power of visuals, the power of telling a story that sits in your hands and being able to put that in the right people's hands and help make that story amazing is just, it's something that will make you irreplaceable. And as I said, I asked ChatGPT to write a story for me. It could never have been a great story as somebody in my team could have written. That's really the power that, that's really in your hands. We were talking about Google these days, like the user experience of Googling something is horrible. Googling a recipe is the worst thing ever. You're going to end up in a minefield of ads, and then into a recipe that is so long you can't even find what you're looking for. And ChatGPT is where I'm going to find out the recipe in 2 seconds, and they're going to reduce the cognitive load for me, in some ways. And I think that's something I'm sure people have been thinking about for a long time, but we don't want to go against the business model that's super successful. So right now, things that have not been broken are breaking. So I think that's where, again, design can really come in and just show what we can do by putting the user's needs in the center of that. So I think that's what inspires me, and why I think this profession is not replaceable in any way. So
thank you. And thank you to our panel tonight for the discussion. Really insightful. I know we could talk about it all night, but we are on a time limit. So we would like to kind of hand it over to the audience. You can go to Slido, put in any questions. If you do want to speak directly to the panel in here and your phone's not working, please just put your hand up and I'll get the mic over to you somehow. But thank you, everyone. Oh, we've got one. I'm on my way.
First of all, your microphone is something beyond the edge. So yeah, my question is a bit philosophical. It comes also to the AI and the statement that you have done before, that AI can't generate the new content. He just can make the analysis of the previous content. But don't you think that the human brain works the same way? Because when we are creating some content, we are just analyzing some things that have happened before with us. Our analysis, our research, that's the most important part. So that's when we are creating the product. So the product from the human brain is also pretty much the mix of the things that we have researched. And also, I think that it's very important to notice about the AI that this technology is still very new. For example, with the story that AI can write the worse story than the copywriter, the AI is still very young. He's like a baby. He just can barely make the small steps. But maybe in 5 years, he will be able to run marathons better than any athletes in the world. So I think that's very important to notice that this technology is still very new. Thank you. I have a question.
No, I think I got the question.
You got it?
Yes, so we definitely can talk more about this after. I think you're right in the two things, as you said. The first one is this is a really young technology, so I'm waiting to see what's coming next. And also, it's a bubble technology. My mom still doesn't know how to use Google Maps, so we need to understand how this is going to get into a bigger and broader audience. So yes, and also I know that that's how our brain works. The problem is that right now the data set is really limited to things that they can read or how they can translate images to that. And our brains, especially if we have a diverse team, can go beyond that. So understanding who is in our teams and how they have what they have in their brains and how the diversity of that team translates into product. I think that's something that we need to push the AI into that direction. And let's keep talking about this.
We're going to do a Slido one. So how design team can involve with data science team, an example of initiatives that design team can take. I don't know if one of the panel wants to.
Okay, I'll just say one practical step you can take, which works for us really well, is hackathons. So doing hackathons together is a great space to like use both skills. So you bring the user knowledge, you can create the outputs, like what the UI could look like. They can create some quick models and demonstrate something very quickly. And I think that was for us a really great space where design and data science could really work together well. And then we created relationships, and eventually that led to some cool products in the end. So hackathons is like a great thing. And if you can't sell it to your management, say like hack 3 days, like, so not hack week, but like, 2.5 days, and then make them the judge, like make the CPO, the VP of product, the judge of the hackathon. They feel really great about that. And then they support it. Tip.
It's a great practical tip for sure. So a little bit to give context here, my background is actually in anthropology, and one thing we like to do there is really embedded work, right? So being with the people that you're studying. And I think something that works really well and that I've seen work firsthand as an initiative to connect teams is what we would call kind of a go along method in anthropology. And it's as simple as it sounds. It's you show up at 9 o'clock where the data science team is, and you just follow them for the day. You walk along with them, you see what the work is being done. And it's only a day usually, but it still creates enough empathy and a bridge there between you and the data science team to have a connection that then maybe once they're talking about this thing that you randomly talk through at the coffee break, they'll come back to you on Slack and say, hey, I found this thing. Do you want to maybe explore it together? It's kind of simple. It only takes a day usually. And oftentimes we're able to get buy-in for that kind of observational work to connect teams. It works very well as a researcher, but I also imagine as a designer, it would work too.
I might be giving this back to you, Josh, or did you say, Paz, you wanted to answer this one? What AI tools do you use in your design process right now, and how?
Is that the one you want to answer?
No, I wanted to answer the other one.
Okay.
She wants to.
Well, somebody want to answer the AI one?
I can answer AI tools. Actually, Solston's platform is AI, so I use it every single day for my work. What we do is kind of work with psychological traits in order to understand different clusters of people within a video game audience. So it's something that I'm familiar with firsthand, and it's interesting the discussion we've been having about how young this technology is, because oftentimes you do have to kind of break in there and say, there's something a little odd here. And then actually going back to the data science team, oftentimes we'll go over there and see, hey, can you just check in on what the AI has produced here? Does this make sense when a human looks at it as well? Oftentimes it does, and it's just a unique surprise, which is really interesting. But that's a tool that I work with every day. Definitely talk to ChatGPT every day, although sometimes it's more interesting than not. But it's really kind of the limit of my AI experience.
Can I answer the question that I want to answer? No, I'm going to merge the how do you see the UX growing in the short future and the stay positive and motivated, because I'm an optimistic always, and I want to answer that question.
Okay.
I'm allowed? So I think like we covered this before, like we are in a uncertain times, as the question says. I think still technology haven't reached all the space that we can reach. There are still a lot of industries, and there is still a lot of growth and innovation and impact that we can have in places that we haven't even seen. Like there are some startups working with agriculture and how we can impact how someone is growing food. So it's insane. And I think one of the biggest skills that we have as designers is understanding complex problems and system thinking and bringing solutions into a space that it was not there. So what better tool than this design thinking mindset and complex understanding and visualizing and innovating in this context of crisis. So I think we have all the skills that we need, and we have all the space to shine. It's even easier now. I'm too optimistic? Yes.
So I guess I'll add.
You can choose.
Okay, I'll add a little bit to this topic of layoffs and like how can we keep the morale up? And I think what everyone's concerned about is design taking a step back. Like, you know, we're like climbing, trying to get a seat at the table. We're getting there, and then suddenly, oh, the design division is cut in half. There's no more VP of design, or you know, whatever's happening in a lot of these companies. Everything is shifting towards this sort of design being execution arm again. And I think that's where, as individuals, we have to work in the teams and in the areas we can influence and do what we can to sort of show the value of design. And it's like what advice I would give the designers I work with a lot, like forget the macro situation right now. How can you make an impact in your team? And it really does work. It does scale eventually. So really focus on that. And as Paz said, there's some really interesting jobs in industries right now. There are going to be amazing jobs being created, not necessarily capitalist, but I do believe in the power of technology to solve future problems. So if you don't want to work for companies anymore that make you feel disposable, then I think it's important to also look for missions that you care about, and that's something really important for me personally.
Thank you. Can you cross personalization and localization, thinking of offering tailored experiences based on culture or location, etc.? Who wants to go on?
So this is definitely the anthropologist in me. Not only can you, I really think it's important to think about the cultural context when designing products. One of the things that's really interesting too is to think about how culture shapes the way that we approach the world, right? So if we're thinking also just about product experiences, what are your expectations from a certain moment often depend on where you've kind of been localized yourself. So one thing that's really interesting working in games is we have a really clear distinction between translation and localization, especially when it comes to gameplay, because localization is actually paying attention to the local cultural norms. There's a lot of interesting work that's done between kind of video games crafted within the West and those tailored for the East. Is the biggest divide that's kind of generalized. And what's interesting is you get really specific localization needs even within different countries within the West and even within different countries in the traditional East. So absolutely, you must personalize and localize based on culture as well. What's perhaps useful though, going back to what my advice was not saying there's 180 different kind of products that we need to create out there, but think about the broad experience you can create and how you can almost hand tailor facets of that experience to that local audience.
I think that was a good answer.
Yeah, I think so too. Happy with that.
What are your thoughts on generalists and those who hold multidisciplinary roles, i.e. an interaction designer or service designer in one?
So I have a real bias to generalists. Like I'm as an architect who switched to UX. When I was hiring for the UX team at the time, I was really seeking generalists and those who wear many hats and do not necessarily paint themselves into a corner. And you know, in a T shape, of course, everyone has this one depth where they're like, "Oh, that's my favorite thing to do. That's my superpower." And it's really great to have in a team a diverse set of Ts. But I really like the idea of yes people, and that's what I look for when I hire great designers. Is how do you approach challenges? And is it from a yes, or is it from a no, or like this sort of yes and perspective? Because I think that that's where design has often got a bad rep sometimes, because design is often like engineering, like, no, we can't do that. No, 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 no. And it's just, it can be long-term, not productive. So that's where it's not necessarily a generalist topic, but I do feel like being open to trying different things and being outside your comfort zone is something that I'm really for in your career.
She hired me, so I have the same opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to add to that, or?
No, +1.
Well, I mean, like anthropologist turned designer, I think that one more thing to add is if you're coming from a different field into design, that's also your strength. Like I had this one designer who came from marketing, and she did wonders with the team that she was working on because of her background, like, which was focusing a lot on communication with the users, go to market, stuff like that. And I think that that's really what you bring to the table, whatever you had, if you switched and pivoted into design. So I really think lean into that, especially as you develop and your skills.
Thank you. So we have time for one more question. But the panel will be here after for networking if you want to ask any more. But I'm going to go for the question to Josh, because I know we've got some user researchers here in the audience. So how do you document and organize your user research findings, and how do you plan a user research roadmap that is in sync with the product roadmap?
That's really precise.
This is asked like an interview question. I'm interested to see who's hiring out here. So I'll answer the first part kind of generally. I think it depends on the team that you're delivering the findings to. And one of the first steps in a really robust UX research process is actually to work hand in hand with your design team, your product team, whoever the stakeholder is, to understand what it means for them to have findings delivered and what works there. What I've seen work kind of across teams is do the study, deliver what I would call kind of like a critical insights reader, which is like, here's the top 4 things you need to know. This is oftentimes also in the report structure called something like an executive summary, except maybe it dives a little bit deeper in. And then follow it up a week later with the actual kind of full findings in whatever form that takes. When it comes to documentation, again, it kind of depends team to team. But one thing I think people forget to do is document for the UX researchers themselves, both for yourself and for people who come after you. Just always be thinking about what would I have loved to known existed when I stepped into this role. I think that's pretty important. And then the other part of the question was about planning a UXR roadmap that's in sync with the product roadmap. Be at the table is maybe the first step. I'm lucky enough to have only worked in companies where UX research was at the table of roadmap planning and was very involved within the product teams. If that's not the case where you're at, or if that's not the kind of a situation you find yourself in, I would advocate for that. Not necessarily to say we're going to do this, but to be able to kind of collect ahead of time what the questions are that your team as a UX researcher is going to need to answer in order for product to really do the best job that they can. Also happy to talk to whoever asked about this afterwards.
Awesome.
We should cover the last one.
Yeah. Do you want to do the?
Maybe we just cover the last one just because, we switched now. Okay, it changed.
I can talk a little bit about this.
The sustainable
I'll do
development.
it small. So I think sustainability and how we design for our planet and our planet in the center of our decisions, it's something we need to start doing now. So if you don't know what sustainable development goals are, please Google that and start understanding how our design, everything looks that is digital, but it has an impact in the real life. So let's start thinking about that. That was fast.
Okay, awesome. Also, data takes space, which is bad for the environment. So less data is good sometimes. Okay, just to add that, people forget about that. Because I'm working in green tech right now. So it's all right. So what advice can you give to a freshly baked UX designer who has no working experience? Okay, one piece of advice quickly. Mine is networking. I got my first UX gig by going bouldering with the right person who got me an interview in a company. So a lot of networking, talk about it with everybody. And once you get in, it's really, it's so easy to learn on the job, but really it's about talking to a lot of people, which can make people uncomfortable and remote, but really it works. Like it can be super effective.
my advice is translate the skills that you already have from your previous job, anthropology, psychology, marketing, whatever, into the UX wordings. So instead of saying, I don't know, interview, you say field work, you say user interview. So translate, make a list and translate and understand that you already know how to do pretty much everything, or at least you can learn the rest.
You could ask ChatGPT to do this for you. ChatGPT can also create questions for you. So interview questions. So you can tell it what job and it can like give you interview questions. Yeah, I don't know.
Great answers. I would also say, aside from get into bouldering, which is one where it's a great networking opportunity for sure. I think showing that you have that transferable skill set, but you're capable to be coached as well as to how your transferable skills need to be refined within the space is super important. I always hire for coachability. I think it's the most important thing when looking for someone a little bit more junior is how able is this person to take what I'm telling them, translate that, and then immediately kind of act on that. That'd be my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you for all the questions.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you so much to our panel for a super informative discussion this evening. I always love talking to you guys. And thank you to everyone who came out this evening. It's so nice to see so many faces and some familiar faces who I've spoken to on the phone. So thank you so much for joining, and everyone who joined virtually as well. Thank you for joining us. And also thank you to the wonderful team at SumUp for collaborating with us for this event. This is where I will leave you to enjoy some drinks and food, speak to everyone around, and I hope you'll get home safe. Thank you.
Can anybody beatbox? Any beatboxers in the house?
With the mic.
All right. Great job, guys. I cannot feel my legs from sitting on this chair. Yeah, I know. Nope. I'll put my back.